statistics on this, Phil. Levitated by the human touch.
Here's the pass. Antonio's through. Chance of four. What a goal! What a brilliant strike by Michail Antonio!
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knees Up Mother Brown West Ham podcast. I am joined, as always, by my two co-hosts. Swinging low with me this week is Callum Goodall, and my sweet chariot is, of course, Jack Elderton. Yeah, rugby happened, and I understand what that is.
I do not endorse this message. In a period of national mourning.
It's your own fault for tweeting about it. I don't care about rugby, but I do care about being annoying. This week, we will be looking back at West Ham and their return to winning ways after a weekend 1-0 win over Wolves. That's a lot of alliteration there. We'll have a look at success on the left, late arrivals on the right, the change of system before the game and in the game as it was going on, as well as good performances from the likes of Fornals and Zouma. Apology for delay between these two pods. Technical difficulties my end. Last week made it less than it should have been. We did, however, spend our week wisely, grabbing an interview with guitarist and West Ham fan Dan McCarthy from the band Koala. Hello, welcome to a special edition of the Knees Up Mother Brown West Ham podcast. We've got a bit of a treat today, something different to the usual, a chance to get to know us a bit more, but far more importantly, we have our special guest ahead of the launch of their debut album Better With You, which is released Friday the 4th of March. We are thrilled to have Dan McCarthy from Koala joining us today. I did see you got the chance to go up against Laura on the BBC predictions.
What an honour!
That's where you want your music career to lead you, surely, to be able to knock horns with Laura on the weekends.
I tell you, when I got that text through, that message from our management saying that I got the call up to do Laura predicts, I was like, well, scrap the album. This is as far as I wanted this shit to take me. Do you know what I mean?
You're going to really disappoint me if I don't get a Loro reference one day loudly on even big stage like Glasgow or something. I'm doing this for Loro.
I am in many ways. If we ever play on the main stage at Glastonbury, I'll bring out Mark Lawrenson.
Gavadon's not got a mention there.
Didn't he have one? He had one leg shorter than the other. Danny, we're getting the band back together. You, me, Loro, main stage of Glasgow.
That's it. Oh, it's all my dreams come true. A big win and a really good performance as well, Cal. A kind of performance off the ball, about as good on it, but really, I guess.
Yeah, it was good. It was nice, energetic. I think was probably my main takeaway compared to previous games where I thought we had definitely looked a bit more tired. And it seemed, just a resurgence, particularly from some certain players who we're going to go on to talk about. And we spoke on the last pod about how every game now is going to be a must win, but how we sort of needed to respond in these situations. And I was worried that maybe after some unfortunate losses and results that we might fall, but they turned up when we needed it and got those 3 points and hopefully keep us in the contention for these European places now. So yeah, chuffed.
Definitely. I think turning up is a key kind of phrase in that, because it was, I think a few of us had worried at least that even the pessimistic and maybe even the more optimistic that there were flagging levels that might cost us in what are very tight games in a quite crazy month or so period of games that we've got going up. I guess everyone turned up from the team and on the bench as well, because the manager made changes and made positive impact on the game to kind of change how we played and make us better, Jack.
Yeah, well, the overriding feeling after the Newcastle game was really that something had to give, whether it was a change in personnel, a change in formation, a change in approach, a change in what we were doing on the training grounds. Something had to shift because, as Cal described, really, the levels just weren't there. The levels haven't been there really for the last month. We've looked like really like we've been out of energy and out of ideas, particularly in possession. It's been quite difficult to watch often, us trying to progress the ball through the thirds and really struggling to play with any kind of invention. So it's massively refreshing actually to see a complete change in approach, and really pleasing that Moyes did make good on what he said after the Newcastle game, which is that he needs to go away now with his staff and look at what they can do differently, and perhaps break a few things to fix them, and that's exactly what they did. Completely different approach, completely different system, different style out of possession to the way we've been playing for a long while, and all worked brilliantly.
I mean, we've noticed on occasion this season that there's been more kind of that front foot defending and the pressing, different players triggering it, Cal and stuff like that. I think it was probably almost the least you expected when you look at a team that you thought was knackered, that they would be so almost taking risks of pushing that high up to do the defending in the opposition half and deep in the opposition half as well.
Yeah, and I think that's well, obviously it was great to see, but I think it obviously stems from sort of the switch up in formation and how if you introduce an extra defender at the back, you can afford to take those commitments further up the pitch because you've got a lot more security in the sense that if an extra player goes forward, there's someone there to cover them. In this case, it was Cresswell quite often, and yeah, it was really nice to see. Antonio, I thought, pressed brilliantly. We've spoke about him and his link up with Fornals and how they can press together in a little pack, and thought that sort of worked really well, but not exclusively them. I thought the whole team pressed well, and fair play to the coaching staff because they'd obviously worked on the triggers beforehand and identified when and how to effectively press, and I thought it came off. And yeah, it was nice to see Fornals back in there on that pressing as well, because I think we said about Benrahma and how he didn't have that sort of relationship with Antonio, and it's always satisfying when something we say pans out in a match.
It's always nice to be proven right, I suppose. I mean, we obviously benefited from the extra rest, and it's worth mentioning. Wolves had played in the week, made some changes, and I know I've seen stats of different teams this year. Some of these teams who have these very disciplined structures that they struggle when they've got those quick turnaround because they don't quite have the time to work on things. But we did note in the Leicester game how good Lanzini was with Antonio. I believe it was Lanzini, and he's come back in today, yesterday. And him and Antonio were really, really good in that kind of area up the pitch, weren't they?
Yeah, combined really, really well. But again, it's really important to assert how different the approach is. I mean, they combined brilliantly away at Leicester, playing in a much more mid press with more of a screening approach, where you sit off a little bit more and you wait for the ball to go into. In that game, it was Ndidi or Tielemans. Here, it would have been Neves or Dendoncker, and that wasn't the approach against Wolves. We looked much more to press onto the centre backs, to press the goalkeeper whenever he had the ball. Just a much higher and more engaged press all round, and yeah, they combined again really well here. And actually, it's not a complete diversion from familiarity. These players have executed this quite well last season at times, and though there's a massive variation on what we did last season with this, and something that we've only really used a couple of times this season. I think I can think of Genk away and in the Europa League, and Spurs away in the League Cup as times where we've used this kind of approach. And so there is a level of familiarity for the players tapping into something that they've obviously been coached on before, but to go such a long period without playing it and to seamlessly transition into a completely different style was really, really impressive.
It worked. It seemed to help work the balance in the midfield as well. Am I right in thinking that it seems that it's Rice that goes as one who, if he's not going as far with them, he's the one who will suddenly burst to make something happen, and Souček seems to sit waiting for those simple balls?
Yeah, that's usually what happens. I think that's largely because Rice has got the better perception in terms of reading opportunities for interceptions. And there were a few good ones against Wolves where he's charged out of midfield and got ahead of a pass that's telegraphed basically, and able to nip in and steal it high. But a lot of the turnovers really came from, I think the credit really has to go to Antonio, Bowen and Lanzini, particularly in that first half, because they're pressing onto Cody, Seiss and Kilman, and sometimes Jose Sarr was constantly forcing long balls out of defence. And though they have got Rice, Souček, Fornals, Johnson to back that up, if the ball does squirt through that first layer of the press, actually the first layer of the press was really effective in just forcing Wolves along anyway. And that's part of what made Zouma look so brilliant in this game, because so many long balls punted up to Fabio Silva, and although Zouma was excellent at winning all of those, he should be winning all of those duels when he's up against a striker that's a lot smaller than him.
In terms of strikers who were doing things kind of well or weren't doing things well, I think you mentioned how good Antonio there was with his pressing and defensively, and I know we've been almost relatively defensive of Antonio kind of lately, in the face of, some could say too often, in the face of kind of criticism that he's faced. But he wasn't just a kind of an off the ball worker yesterday, Cal. He did, I mean, he produced the assist. He did have a really good game and kind of a return to obvious form, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he performed a lot better, or it was a lot more obvious, but I don't think he was doing that many things differently to what we've kind of pointed out in our defenses of him, in the sense that he's hitting those channels. He's this almost trademark move that he's developed where he just rolls off the shoulder of whatever centre back he's up against, because he knows he'll have him for pace and strength. And numerous times in that Wolves game, you saw it. He'd sort of, there was one moment where he was particularly wide, and it was almost like a 100-meter sprinter. Once he was free, you just see him absolutely puffing arms out, just bearing down onto goal. And it happened time and time again. And it is great to see. And hopefully this is a lengthy return to form for him. And his creativity again stood out, obviously for the assist for the goal, but there was more than one time where he sort of got into that final third and unselfishly looked up to try and pick out a Lanzini. And I can think of a few chances where had luck fallen our way, or people timed their runs marginally better, or I guess you could flip that and say Antonio put the pass slightly more precisely. But it could have been 2-3-0 if we'd have found the back in those situations. But yeah, a marked improvement, even though I would say that his performances haven't been as bad as people have been making out in recent times.
I think the one you're talking about, it reminds me in a way, whilst obviously having very few similarities of it, there's a Gareth Bale goal at Real Madrid where he kind of gallops really elegantly down a wing. And when Antonio does it, he probably kind of gallops with every sinew moving. And I think it's the one in particular is the one where, if I remember from your rewatch thread, Jack, that's the one where you're screaming shoot, and he has looked up inside to see what he can do.
Yeah, I think first of all with that, he has done unbelievably well to even get himself in that situation. He's received back to goal, rolled Cody, and we talk about how well he does this. This is probably the best example. Lovely body feint, sends Cody the wrong way, spins the other way, uses his speed to get round the outside. And then actually, this is the area where I can get a little bit frustrated with the commentary of Antonio, because he can often be derided as someone who lacks technical ability, but his touch to invite Kilman in, and then the second touch he takes to nick it round Kilman, to take Kilman out of the game, to stop him from being able to block any shot, is fantastic attacking play and fantastic close control. And then who knows what happened, really. I think he's keen. I put it down to keenness to get it onto his right foot. I think maybe he's got that a little bit of a lack of confidence in front of goal right now. He knows he's able to find teammates, but he's struggling to put the ball in the back of the net himself. But once he's through in that situation, he has to shoot off his left peg, surely. Once he's taken it round Kilman, he can just swing at it with his left peg, and half the goal is open to him. So a great chance, but he deserves massive credit for creating it all himself, really.
Yeah. I just wonder whether maybe actually having an opportunity where he should have shot and he's passed and it's not worked, it's going to be in his head next time. He's full, I did that pass last time. Yeah. And that's not happening again. I'm just going to have a go. Yep. And you never know. He might poke the ball with his right foot, miss the ball with his left foot, swing and fall over. But at least the intent will be right. Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's why I was so happy to just let him off the hook. That is because I think even in the last game, there was shots where he was just leathering them miles over the bar. And we've seen it throughout his career. So when he does try and put it on a plate, I'm kind of, you know what? Maybe yes, a clinical striker would just bury that, but I'm still not sure I have confidence in him burying it in that situation.
Yeah, I suppose I think the good sign was early on was, I can't remember who passed it to him, kind of in the right angle, the right corner of the Wolves box, and his shot didn't really get much attention on the commentary, if I remember correctly. It was actually really well saved by Sark, heading towards his left, the top corner, and it was a kind of a sign of something that maybe, we've discussed, we defended his game before, but he hadn't had that moment where you suddenly thought he was threatening goal. And I think that was probably a bit of a boon to him, actually, to everyone around him playing into him, to see him do that. And then on the goal, which won't get you to analyse too much, because almost what we need is a Wolves analytics person to discuss, what he thinks that Saiz has seen that's caused him to go off for a nice hike in the countryside of, East London. But I mean, what made me really, really happy about that goal was his patience on the ball, just to let the pass roll in front of him, get himself, characteristically individual in the fact that I don't remember really seeing most players jump and do a 180 spin in the air rather than just kind of turn around. But, Antonio is Antonio. But he then, doing that has stopped him doing something rash, doing something difficult, because he has given himself the chance with his composure to look up and see a very simple pass for Souček to tap in what was actually a rather quiet game for Souček as well. But it's that kind of return to form that this whole team needed that as well, because there was times in the first half where we had dominance. We really did in the first half, and we weren't taking advantage of that, and we haven't. I mean, I guess you can be very, very happy that we didn't just give away a goal on the brink of half time for no reason. And that was in itself was an improvement.
Well, we very nearly did. We very nearly did. Frank had that excellent chance with a couple of seconds to go. I think just briefly to round up on Antonio, I think there's a couple of things I'd like to say. The final few minutes and the mistakes he made there have been massively overcooked anyway, because 2 of those 3 mistakes he creates for himself again by rolling someone and getting himself in behind. So then I wouldn't class them as egregious errors. And the one that is where he loses the ball on halfway and then tries to compensate by making a tackle that he's never going to be able to make and gives away a free kick and gets himself booked. That is really poor. But then I think, again, this is where we come back to sort of like, if we had that backup striker, then there's no way that he'd be on the pitch with that little energy left. And he was still really, hauling himself around the pitch through sprints to try and impact the game, despite having clearly got nothing left in the tank. And then also, just to kind of dovetail with what we were saying about how we've defended him recently, I think he benefited massively from playing counterintuitively against the back 3, because the channels are actually tighter. Against the back 4, he's having to spin quite wide to get in between the centre back and the full back, but here he's able to pin himself onto Cody, draw Cody out by dropping deep, and then spin into the space between Cody and the centre backs either side of him. So the channels are actually much tighter to the centre of the box, the ones that he wants to hit. So he's hitting the right areas by being able to do that, and I think it massively benefited him to isolate that 1v1. Where in other games he's struggled to drag a centre back with him across the pitch. He was able to pull Cody everywhere for the whole 90 minutes, which benefited him hugely, because it creates those gaps in the centre of Wolves' defence for him to attack.
Yeah, it was a kind of a game that seemed to all fall quite well for him in that respect. If we're talking about other standout performers, it will be no surprise to anyone who listens to this podcast regularly that I would like to bring up a Spaniard, and Pablo Fornals, who I thought dealt with a new system really, really well, kind of in a formation I don't really remember him playing kind of as deep as that, except for Wolves away this season. And it was kind of his passing, I think, that got me, Cal. It was the kind of forward passing, the direct passing, and almost being the one who takes the risky pass, isn't afraid to try something that might lose him the ball, because he's got the technique to trust himself wherever on the pitch he was as well.
Yeah, 100%. We've called out that makes it sound bad. We've highlighted his passing in dangerous areas before on this podcast, particularly his pass into the penalty area. But like you've rightly said, it was sort of his line-breaking passes today not today, but this weekend, that really stood out to me. Completing 3, they're called smart passes on Wisecout, but that is just a line-breaking pass basically that goes through the defence and cuts through their lines and creates an attacking opportunity. So to complete 3 of them is really quite crazy. I think the best performer in terms of per 90 this season is Kevin De Bruyne, and that was less than 3. So that's kind of the performance that we're looking at him putting in. But yeah, there was one that particularly stood out. I think it was when he hit Cresswell on the overlap. It was kind of like a little dink chip pass through that created another opportunity, and that was really great. And then after I'd looked at this, it kind of I thought it important to just look across the whole season to see sort of what kettle of fish he's fitting in with in terms of this smart passing. It's something we've not really spoken about on the podcast before as a type of pass. We've discussed key passing, pass to the final third and stuff like that. But in particular, I thought line breaking passing was quite important to look at, because we've talked a lot recently about our inability to pick open defences. And it's something that I think really stood out. So I found that in the Premier League this season, he has the 3rd best success rate for players committing line-breaking passes, with 57%. And he's only beaten by Bernardo Silva, which, it's Bernardo Silva, so you're quite happy to say you can go first. And he's on 61%, so it's only 4% better. And then the one I was more surprised by was Stuart Dallas, who's also on 61%, tied first, which I suppose is only surprising because of the season that Leeds have had. But then I found that Fornals is actually averaging considerably more, in some cases double, attempted smart passes per 90. So when you kind of balance that out, I'm going to say Fornals is probably the best smart passer in the league. You had it here first. But yeah, it was just nice. Yeah, it was just nice to see. But then you've rightly brought up his passing, but I thought what was most surprising for me in that game was how good he was defensively. We know he can press, but one thing that we've pointed out before is how how much worry he gives me when someone is attempting to dribble past him. We've pointed out earlier in the season, I think he ranked worst in terms of dribbled past per 90. So when I saw him sort of starting in a more defensive role out on that flank, I was like, oh gosh, here we go. He's going to get skinned. And he was insane. He had 6 ball recoveries, which is 2 more than his average, won 70% of his defensive duels. That's like better than that. That's insane numbers. That's like the numbers that someone that's played left back their whole career is putting up on a good day. So for him to do that, I was really impressed. And then 100% of the loose balls he won as well, which I think is testament to that sort of energy and alertness that we spoke about earlier on from the whole team. Just that sort of, when that ball's there, everyone was ready to get on it and win it. And he was one of the prime examples of a player that was on form.
I suppose what he did bring as well is something we would talk about those line breaking passes at the top, Jack. But what we've struggled with for 2-3 months, I don't know however long, is kind of building up, isn't it? We've not been great at building up. We've ended up putting up an attacking midfielder by your positional sense, by your formations, into a left wing back slot, and he's probably been our best creative player going forward, and also started our attacks at the back as well. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe something like that of a player who shouldn't be able to do that really in English football, Jack. But he was huge on the day.
I think, lots of impressive things. Carl's rightly spoken a lot about his passing, but also his defensive contribution, but and his pressing, but also, as you point to, his energy throughout the whole game to get up and down that left flank. So consistently for the whole match, to press really high, to recover and be making tackles at the back when he needs to be setting us away from defence, and then being the player to then make the final pass in the final third as well. Pretty exceptional performance all round.
And all that from a man that's probably not getting much sleep either, because he's just got
no.
baby.
Yeah. Maybe it was. I mean, I'm sure all have seen the videos of Baby Fornals interrupting Ben Johnson's post-match press conference interview, and kind of videos of him pre and post game. Maybe he just needs the lad there with him every week to G him up. In terms of other performers, I think my man of the match, even with my Pablo Fornal bias, is probably Kurt Zouma, who, since the controversy, may be the best centre back in the Premier League now. I don't know.
On form.
Over
the last few weeks, I think you struggle to find a player who's hitting better levels. The guy's dropping very close to 10 out of 10 every week at the moment. Pretty much faultless here. I think there were a couple of mistakes at the start of the second half, but other than that, exceptional in the air. I think that role actually in the middle of a back three suits him down to the ground, really, because he can charge out of the defense with the two to cover him on either side to just be so dominant up on that halfway line. Just think brilliant in the air, brilliant recovering every time Silva did manage to get in behind Dawson. It was mostly who Silva did get some joy in behind. Zouma was always there to cover that. So great sliding challenges. There was one about 30 minutes in where Silva spun in behind, and it was an unbelievable recovery tackle on Silva in the box when Silva looked almost certain to score. Did panic as soon as that happened that he might have done his ACL again, because he limped around for the rest of the game. But he seems to have made that a thing now. He seems
as a man who's torn some ligaments before, I think he's still in that fear of every time it hurts, it must be that injury. It must be that injury. And then he kind of go, oh no, it just hurts. It's not that I've done it. It's just I'm in pain. It's just every time. There's long stories I could tell you, but wasting my time of an awful football career. it was. I suppose it's not the first time I think he's played in the kind of back five for us, but it's been rare since he started. He's generally been a kind of a two, part of a two, hasn't he, Go?
Yeah, I think the last time from memory would probably be. Did we not go to a back five for a bit against that in that Chelsea game where he got that injury?
Yes, we did. We went through a lot of formations, even more than we did in the game, I think. And we'll come to that. But yeah, he's settled back in, obviously, excellently since he went kicking things.
Yeah, he was brilliant. I think that it's just funny to point out, really, that I mean, Jack's hit every note that we need to discuss, but I noticed that the only duel he lost in the entirety of the game, of which there were 17, was an offensive duel. Everything else he won. Every header he won. Every defensive duel he won. Every loose ball he won. And then to top it all off, he had like 90% pass success as well. So the perfect.
That's some really nice line breaking passes as well.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. I
Really
remember he hit
nice.
one really firmly as well. I remember thinking, oh, that's a confident man's pass. Just having that.
Yep.
Yeah. Pity to anyone who says a match report writer who's going to have to give a player of the month at the end of this month and doesn't want to be the man who goes, yeah, it's been a great month for Kurt Zouma.
You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to.
Might put that responsibility on your illustrious editor. Other good performers, I think Lanzini kind of an obvious standout, but I'll go to Jack because you were kind of adamant that we should kind of discuss Cresswell as well at the start.
Yeah, he loves that left centre back role. He's so good in there. It kind of covers all of his defensive deficiencies, allows him to be a really great progressor of the ball, allows him to make late runs where he can cross from free positions. Actually, really something I spoke about after the Newcastle game. I'm not really sure if it went out in the end. I think I might have cut it from the article that I put out, but often what we've seen from the fullbacks is crossing from deep areas, and something that we haven't seen very much of is either Cresswell or Soufal or Johnson or Fredericks does it a little bit, but most of the fullbacks crossing from the byline. And that's something that we saw in this game, is that Cresswell being able to make those late underlapping often runs beyond Fornals and then getting away to the byline and being able to cross the ball in. So I thought he was excellent and defensively pretty much faultless. He did a really, really good job. Came out of defence really aggressively a number of times, which I thought was brilliant, and kind of stopped Trincao from being able to get much of a foothold in the game in the first half. And then recovered really well into the back five, did all of his work back there really well. So a solid performance. And I think he's quite good against Newcastle. So I think if he's getting back to those best levels, then that will really help us a lot.
He's not getting exposed, having to do a little bit of lazy marking at the back post. He's generally all right. I'll kind of skip Lanzini, but I think the only concerns, I guess, were a lot of concerns. It wasn't even, it's harsh criticism when there's only one player we can give a really harsh criticism on top of being a good player. It's Declan Rice. And he didn't have a bad game by any means. And he was kind of key in some things. And he did the pressing up and you saw those kind of darting runs forward. Very unlucky not to score when he smacked the post, but it wasn't still kind of not highest levels he could get to, Cal.
No, I don't think so. I think I saw quite a few people chucking around the fact that he had 11 interceptions in a game against Wolves, which, I mean, yeah, that's a high number, but also we only had like 37% possession. So obviously you're going to have a lot more interceptions if you don't have a lot of the ball because you're constantly chasing it around and winning it back. So I think his pressing was good, but well, from what I've seen, it's kind of been overloaded a bit because I think you have to take the context into account. And then, yeah, I think his, like you say, it's harsh to criticize because I don't think he had a bad game per se, but his passing, I think, just wasn't that great. I think I've got him down as only completing 3 passes to the final third, which is not really good enough, in my opinion, for a team who we've said have sort of struggled in that progression and in transition. But what I will say is that was kind of offset, just to go back to the previous point, by the sort of lovely little trifecta of Lanzini, Fornals and Cresswell, whose link up was pretty exceptional throughout, and they contributed for 44% of all of our completed forward passes in the game, just the 3 of them. So I mean that sort of, whilst Rice didn't have the most amazing game in terms of his forward progression, half of me is thinking maybe he just realized that he didn't really need to. Like, if you've got those 3 and you're putting all the onus on them to progress it on that left side, then Rice can go about doing his defensive business and a bit of ball carrying and stuff that we've seen him pick up this season, because he knows that he doesn't need to carry that burden as much when those 3 are in that form.
He did mention, I think, in the post press conference style interview with him and Souček, which was generally just a love-in between two very happy midfielders. He mentioned being quite happy to let Souček go on and do some of that attacking work. I mean, it is nitpicking, isn't it, Jack? It's kind of seeing things he could do better rather than seeing something he's done wrong, I suggest. You kind of, in your thread, it's seeing options he could have taken, forward passes, and where he's kind of gone sideways or backwards.
I disagree with Cal about his interceptions. I think his pressing was very, very good at the weekend. I think some of the best defensive work we've seen from him in a long while. And when you know Rice is at his best off the ball is when he's making the wrong choice, which he did, I think, 3 times from memory in the game, where he's got caught ahead of the ball, and he's still able to make the recovery tackle look ridiculously easy. He can turn, reach a leg round, win the ball back, and you're like, you should have been punished there. You should have been punished there, and yet you've just made that look stupidly simple to recover your error. So I think off the ball he was brilliant. My issues with Rice in this game were more just back yourself. You've got the quality to hit balls that break lines. You by far, I think, probably the best striker of a ball in the team. And several times, I mean, the most obvious option that everyone will remember is when Fabianski lays the ball out to him on the left flank. Bowen is completely free on the right side of the pitch on about the halfway line. There's no one marking him. He's got a free run all the way towards the goal. Rice sees the pass. He actually stops, looks, sees the pass, and doesn't back himself, and slides a pass round down the line for Antonio. And Antonio does really well to win a corner after that. But if he just plays that crossfield ball to Bowen, it's a great opportunity for a goal. And there are a couple of instances like that in this game where you just think you've got the quality to play those progressive passes. And I don't think it's a thing of like, oh, there's other players to carry that burden. He doesn't necessarily need to be the most effective or most crucial progressive passer in the team, but when the opportunity is there, he needs to learn to pick his moments and back himself and try. And there were a number of times in the game at the weekend where he turned out and played backwards when he had options ahead of him. So that's just that next level that he needs to go to, and we've seen him do it before. It's not that he isn't a good passer; he is a good passer. We've seen him hit those levels before. He just needs to tap back into that top level that he can hit.
That's just kind of tweaks rather than kind of criticism, I guess. It's what I know. We've got people come for, what the listeners come for, I'm sure, in this is going to be tactical and analytical. And that then, if I can notice a formation change, then anyone listening can notice a formation change. I am the layman in this respect. Formations is your gambit, Jack. And there were plenty in the game, weren't there?
There were a lot of changes made in the game. I think for all the complaining about the lack of substitutions, which we'll come to, I think Moyes is the kind of manager who will prefer to shift the pieces that are out there into different shapes rather than changing who's actually on the pitch. And that's something you saw a lot in the game against Wolves, particularly in the second half, a lot of different shapes used. We started the game with a 5-2-2-1, which is not something we've seen. I mean, I said this earlier, not something we've seen since that Spurs away match in the League Cup. And we saw it in the first half there, which was bonkers. Really, we created a lot of chances. Spurs created a lot of chances. And somehow we went into, I think, 2-1 down, right? And the game ended 2-1. But we could have scored, I think, 3 or 4 goals in that first half at Spurs, and so something it has been really good for is those high turnovers in the middle third. And when I say middle third, I mean not on the right flank or on the left flank. You're turning the ball over in the middle of the pitch, quite high up the pitch, and if you can play 1 or 2 passes, you can be straight through on goal. And that's something that we did to great effect against Spurs back then, and something that we were able to do to great effect against Wolves. And I think it's something you generally employ when you think the opposition centre backs aren't very good on the ball, and you can get after them and force them to go long or force them to make passes that they're not confident in making and turn the ball over in the centre of the pitch. And that's something that we did very well in the first half. Use of a box midfield, I think you wanted to talk about, Chris, which is where you kind of set up the 4 midfielders in a rectangular shape, rather than being flat as a 4. Often we would have seen when we play a back 5 with Moyes, it would be a 5-4-1. And that is kind of the most defensive iteration of the system as possible. But with the box midfield, you're actually encouraging those balls into the wide areas, and then you snap into 3v2s really aggressively. So you pull Bowen, Souček and Johnson across for a 3v2 on the right side, or Antonio, Rice and Fornals across for a 3v2 on the left side, but you're encouraging the balls to begin with rather than sitting in the flat shape, encouraging the opposition to pass the ball around the defence. You actually want them to play progressively, because that's where you're going to get the turnovers. Something that was quite difficult against Spurs, because we wanted them to play progressively, and sometimes it worked for us, but actually they had the quality to play through enough. Wolves didn't really have the quality to play through us enough on Sunday. And then in the second half, there were lots of different systems we used to begin with. Out of possession, we moved to more of a 5-3-2 with Lanzini dropping in alongside Rice and Souček. That was probably my least favourite period of the game. I think that was far too narrow, the three of them. I didn't really think we adjusted very well. I didn't think that either Rice or Souček took on that central role in terms of commanding where the two should be and really owning and dominating that central space. So actually what you ended up with was 3 in the central space and no one really able to help out wide. So you ended up with Fornals and Johnson really exposed in 1v1s as the wing backs. Strangely enough, Fornals coped with that and Johnson didn't. Not something you'd really expect. I think partly I would give Cresswell most of the credit on the left side, and Dawson had much more problems.
A little bit of the benefit of having a left back playing inside you rather than a centre back playing inside you. Cresswell was more comfy. Cresswell
was much happier to come out and assist and create a better sort of 2v2 or 2v1 situation where you can kind of stop the cross. Dawson didn't really fancy that, so so it was much harder on the right side. And then after that 5-3-2, very brief switch to a 5-2-1-2 where Lanzini went back in ahead and between Bowen and Antonio and Rice and Souček. That looked much better defensively, but again, I think we looked quite tired, and again the wing backs were far too exposed. I think Bowen wasn't really recovering brilliantly. I think Souček had a lot of issues in recovery in this period of the game because the two of them, Rice and Souček, were having to cover ridiculous ground in that period of the match. So exposed, with Wolves pushing so high and switching to a back 4. So then at last, right at the end of the game, I think with about 7 minutes left, we went to a 5-4-1, which I think came far too late because we would have been much more comfortable in controlling the game in the period beforehand. And once we went to a 5-4-1, I know a lot of people were quite nervous, and I was very anxious watching it the first time in those last 10 minutes. But really, from that point on, we didn't really concede anything. We forced Wolves into long diagonals into the box, which Fabianski claimed completely comfortably over and over again, and Wolves' only really opportunities came from shots from distance. So as soon as we went back into that 5-4-1 shape, we were very comfortable.
It was a reminder, I suppose, at the end, Cal, about where the critical thing that we've had with Moyes basically is substitutions, and it's I think it was a point mentioned before that kind of, maybe Vlasic at 100% is better than Lanzini at 60-50%. And it was a game yesterday where I think you'd agree at the end, Jack, that it was Antonio, Bowen and Lanzini, Cal, they weren't really able to do the work that they needed to do to be a force at either end, really, actually. So it meant not only were we unable to make the ball stick, but we weren't covering back. And this you'd hope something is being said in an ear somewhere that says, actually, we needed energy, boss, not in the 90th minute, but maybe in the 85th at latest.
Yeah, it is a consistent source of infuriation, just not bringing on those extra legs. But the only thing I can think is that when you think about it in the context of when we spoke about, I don't want to use him because he keeps getting called out as a scapegoat, but where Benrahma's not necessarily been able to follow tactical instructions as easily as, say, a Fornals or a Lanzini. And I can only assume that Moyes perhaps is fearful that when you're playing this sort of fluid game where the system is changing so much, so fast, so frequently, it's almost more important to have someone who has the requisite sort of footballing IQ to be able to change at the same pace as the game is changing, rather than just bringing on someone just because they're fresh. Because if you bring them on and they're fresh, but they're not following your instructions correctly, then that's arguably, yeah, they can run a bit faster. But if they're running faster out of position, or they're running faster to trigger a press at the wrong moment, then that's actually going to be more damaging than having someone who's a little bit more tired but is occupying the right places and stifling opposition attacks more effectively. That would be the only thing that I can think. Like, I too definitely get frustrated when particularly in attacking transitions, where it's like we just need that little extra burst of pace, or someone to sort of commit to a run that they just don't have the legs for. But I would much rather be sort of a little bit less energetic in the attack, but stopping gaping holes from opening up in the 80th minute and conceding these sort of goals that we've seen, well, particularly in the last minutes of first halves, where we seem to have lost concentration largely because of fatigue, you can imagine.
Yeah, it's trusting them to do what he wants to do that's the most important thing, I suppose. And in his mind, that positional awareness, even in the last 5 minutes of knowing your man and knowing where the runners are going to be, I guess he trusts Fornals, and I can understand why maybe you don't trust Benrahma to
and
react.
it's frustrating in a different sense, and because, like, obviously you would just prefer that he just trusted everyone, but that's just not the position we're in.
I think there's two things to talk about. One, you're right to look at trust, but the second thing I think is the players that would have come on in the situation just weren't there, they weren't fit. So I think Masuaku and Fredericks both would have come on to play the wide roles in the 5-4-1, probably about 78, 79 minutes in, just before the 80th minute when Jimenez came on. And actually we just didn't have those options. I wouldn't have wanted to put Benrahma on in that left wing slot in a 5-4-1. Frankly, I was surprised that Vlasic didn't come on earlier for Bowen, who Bowen ended up playing the full match, and I actually thought Bowen was the player out of the three that looked the most knackered. So I thought that was a little bit strange. And I think really, if you can't trust a player like Cryle to do a job in terms of very simple job of shielding from left midfield or right midfield for 10 minutes, then how has he ended up at the club? I don't really understand recruitment wise how he's ended up at the club if you can't trust him to do something that simple.
No, it is a little bit of it's more damning, I guess, on the players that are left behind rather than anything else. I know what you mentioned when you talked about the formation, you were talking about kind of clusters of players, and it tied into something, Cal, you mentioned before we came on in our little meetings, production meeting we have, about kind of, we've talked about that balance to the left and the priority on the left, but actually we've talked about it almost as a negative, as actually it has positives on almost what the right aren't having to do, which enables them to do something else, I suppose.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly there, really.
Summed it up without actually saying what it means.
Some might call me fickle because I'm going to come to the defence of the left side emphasis that I slagged off the week before, but it worked well. But yeah, it was another game where the emphasis was massively on this left side. So I think 76% of our positional attacks came from the left. So a positional attack is basically just any open play attack that isn't a counter attack. I don't know why they don't just say something slightly more obvious than positional. I found it confusing when I first came across the term. And then of those,
you can use a different term. You don't have to use that term.
He sounded like a man who was criticising it but couldn't work out what he wanted to call it himself. So it was just I don't
got away with it.
I don't have to say anything else.
Yeah.
Just
I'll
calling
come up
people
with
out.
a new term. Yeah. But yeah, so of those 76% of positional, I've done it again. You know what I mean? Those attacks that come from the left side, we created 49% of our total XG. So you can see that the threat really does come from this side. And previously we've talked about reasons for this, being that the majority of our most creative players, or the players we trust in attack to bring the ball up, so Rice, Cresswell, Fornals, Benrahma, they're all on that left side. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that yes, we're going to try and channel it all down the left flank. But something we've not talked about is, as you already mentioned, Chris, what it means for the right hand side of the attack, because I kind of looked at the numbers initially and thought, okay, well, why have we created 0 XG from attacks on the right flank? That's such a heavy imbalance that I really want to see fixed. But when you kind of drag the emphasis over to the left, it's not just the left side that are engaged, it also brings the whole right side of the attack across with them. And I think the perfect example is obviously how we've seen Souček score in this game. Admittedly, yes, it was because of a rather damning error on Sais's part. But the sort of by shifting everything over to the left, it gives the likes of Souček the freedom to come into the box and occupy these dangerous spaces. And also, I think Lanzini in this game, there was one moment where I think he was really unfortunate not to score. I think it was quite a chance where they'd cut it back and he kind of just missed the goal, and then he was head and hands on the floor. But it kind of, I guess in the simplest terms, it kind of just confuses the defense because everyone's responsibilities kind of shift quickly because all these players kind of shuffle along one, and then there's all sorts of chaos that you can create. So yeah, I just thought it seemed a sensible thing to bring up because we've understandably criticized this left emphasis when it hasn't worked. But it did work this weekend, and I thought we should look at the other side of it.
What you were saying is before is that of the players that you want arriving, the players that you want to be doing those late arrivals are the right side players, aren't you? You don't want Rice being your kind of, I don't know, the modern day 90s Paul Scholes. You kind of want Souček ghosting in. He's not the creator, is he? He's not going to do your guile.
Well, I think that's kind of what it stemmed from, is that we've talked about the imbalance, and yes, it is an imbalance in terms of percentages because such a high percentage of our attacks come down the left and such a low percentage come down the right. But almost bizarrely, it's kind of a perfectly balanced starting 11 in the sense that you've got all your best creators out on the left, and you've got Bowen, who's arguably is our most prolific scorer at the minute, and Souček, our biggest aerial threat, and not only aerial but in terms of late arrival, the guy has just kind of a knack of picking up these positions, not even inside the box but also outside the box. We've seen him score goals by doing that before. I think against Watford and maybe Villa both come to mind off the top of my head. So it's kind of Moyes has built this squad. Yeah, exactly. So that it just seemed funny in my head that we talk about an imbalance when also you could flip it around and go, well, actually, it is balanced in the sense that it's split perfectly down the middle.
It's all about making space for the people. So Bowen is obviously finding all that space that he wouldn't be finding if it was all crushed down on the right side of the pitch. You'd then be asking Fornals, who doesn't quite have the same knack for goal scoring, I guess, as well either. Not that Bowen took the big chance he had created.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good point generally about definitely the attack, but I think in terms of moving forward with this system, you would have to have definitely a wing back on the right side who's comfortable crossing, which we didn't have in this game. I think Johnson forward is brilliant defensive work. I'm not sure what his cross completion was in this game, but from a first and second watch without
0.5%, it was 1 of 8.
1 of 8 is a really, really poor retirement, especially for someone who I feel that, as you're describing, crosses are dropping out to him on the right side where he's actually got time to line something up. So he really should be doing a lot better from the positions he's getting into. But then also with Craig Dawson on the right side as your centre back, we're talking about Cresswell timing those underlapping or overlapping runs really well from left centre half. You've just got none of that threat from your defence on the right side if you play that back five. And I think you're right to pull out that actually the attackers you've got arriving from the right are the people you want arriving from the right, and perhaps not the people you want whipping the ball in or whatever. But when the ball drops out on the right side, you need to have a wing back who's competent at getting the ball into the box, and you also probably need to have, for at least some balance and build up, a right-sided centre back who's confident in carrying the ball out and playing a pass that breaks the lines at least from time to time. So yeah, then that's perhaps the biggest issue with a lot of people will say, can we move forward with this system or not? Can we play this next week and going forward? I think that's probably the biggest issue, is where's that kind of ability coming from in the defence on the right-hand side? Definitely.
And I suppose, granted, we are working slightly with a makeshift defence. So first choice, I guess, Ogbonna would have been in the centre of that 3, and Zouma might have been right side. The other point, and it's a really difficult one. I know we struggle in a way assessing goalkeepers, and I've been reading some stuff about assessing goalkeepers this week, and you can see even people who are good at it find it really difficult. There was a difference. They're quite different goalkeepers, and I thought Fabianski, when he did the stuff that we think Areola is maybe more inclined to do, the kind of catching and stuff, he was really dominant, and it was really important the times he did it. But he does have that kind of conservative approach.
Yeah, I think I don't want to call it a trend, but it's something I've noticed a few more times now, is that the volume of these sort of progressives, perhaps not the right word, but more sort of sweeper sort of activities, that where he commits to coming off his line, something that's generally considered uncharacteristic of Fabianski. The volume isn't necessarily going up dramatically, but the decision making of when to do it has improved from at least what I can see. I know on multiple episodes of the podcast this season, I've said how, like, in the 80th minute he's come out and claimed the high cross, and it's almost at risk of sounding like a broken record, but that is what we've sort of said we need to see, and has often been my rationale for saying at various intervals that Areola needs to come into the team, because we need a more assertive keeper. We need someone who's more proactive. And I think, like you said, in this game, there was moments where we just need that sort of bit of assurance, and it just, when you do it as well, it gives the whole team like a few moments breath. Like he claims that ball, and then he just sort of, you see him like put the hands, he's like looking at the players, like, calm, like, everyone chill, we've got the ball, get in your positions, get the shape. It's what you need. It is what you need.
And it's different because Sarr, I mean, you mentioned getting a thread, Jack, the kind of difference in a proactive goalkeeper. Sarr was more proactive.
I think Fabianski is excellent at coming in, claiming crosses in those situations. High balls, I think he's very, very good at dealing with, particularly diagonals. I think he struggled to find. I think it was Bruno Lage said afterwards, I think he called him the best keeper in the world at claiming high diagonals. And I think that's pretty spot on. He's
very specific praise.
But where we talk about Fabianski struggling is more from those kind of whipped crosses that might come from the byline, and being able to come out then and maybe punch the ball. We don't really see that from Fabianski, but when the ball is punted in from deep, he is very, very good at claiming above everyone and relieving that pressure on the defence. Good again at the weekend against Wolves, very marked in the last 10 minutes. And actually something that I was impressed with in the game was his timing of releasing us in the second half onto counter-attacks. Really nice balls out, couple of really nice ones out to Bowen, and some really nice passes where he's throwing the ball out to Rice to be able to trigger a counter-attack. But the big difference between Fabianski and Sarr, and when you're talking about playing a back three or a back five and committing to some more aggressive duels from your centre backs, something that Wolves massively benefit from is when they are beaten in behind, when Antonio is able to roll in behind, or Bowen is able to make a run and be picked out. Sarr is always able to read these situations. He is brilliant at coming off of his line, reading when the danger is there, and being in a good position to be able to charge out. And I think probably 3 times I can remember in the game, perhaps even 4, where he's come out and disrupted either with a tackle or by patting the ball away with his palm of his hand. And that's really very useful for Wolves in terms of allowing them to commit to those more aggressive duels. And that, I think, is something that we miss a little bit with Fabianski. He is the most passive keeper in the Premier League, the least likely to come off his line. It's the least number of involvement, or lowest number of involvements in any kind of duel outside of his box, or really off his goal line. So when those balls do come in behind, and it was perfectly exemplified at the start of the first half, where there was a ball in behind Cresswell. I think it was However, who pushed the ball and tried to run round Cresswell. And Fabianski was so slow to arrive that Zouma actually came all the way across and put the ball out for a corner. And this is where you perhaps, if you're going to play that system and commit to those slightly more aggressive duels from your centre backs on either side, then you do need your keeper to be able to back that up if they get beaten in behind, and that's definitely not something we get from Fabianski.
What we do get on the flip of that is he doesn't come out and make those errors that can cost goals like Areola has done. You can see the risk in maybe being slightly more proactive sometimes and I guess that's why he doesn't do it, because he wants that security of his goal. He knows his goal, he knows where he is, and maybe that's a little bit. He strikes me at times as a bit of a throwback goalkeeper in some respects, that he does those. It feels like he does come out and claim those high balls late on, almost in that way you used to get, where it felt like, oh, this is a big, like almost look around to the defenders and tell them to calm down. And that is something he kind of has to, he makes the decision he needs to be doing those things when it's important.
Yeah, I think there was a moment as well, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, where Sarr, that was almost an example of the risk that's involved when you do come off the line. I think Bowen sort of nicked possession off him, and Sarr was caught pretty far out in his penalty box. They didn't get punished for it in the end, but it was just sort of that. There is flip sides to it, but I do agree with Jack. It's like, if this is a system that Moyes is looking at again, I mean, we're going to have to replace Fabianski anyway, because we've said, as good as he has been, there has been moments. I think the most obvious example for me is that Jack Harrison goal against Leeds, where he just, a faster keeper that's more like would have been off that line and slide tackled and kicked out for a throw or whatever. and that sadly does kind of just come with age, and he's not just suddenly going to get a burst of pace at 37 or whatever age he is. But yeah, whether Areola's the remedy to that, I don't know, and whether we're going to go on to sign him. I think I'm slowly becoming more towards the side that I don't know if Moyes is actually that interested in buying him, but we'll see. That's a summer thing. I know that
the wages are a big issue with Areola, but I do like the blend. I think if we can move forward having a number one who you're really confident, or two different keepers, basically one who you're really confident with 1v1s. Fabianski's an excellent 1v1 keeper, brilliant on his line, and then another keeper who you can turn to as a more proactive option, someone who can come out and make more impact off of his line as more of a sweeper keeper. I think having the two options is really beneficial.
Yeah, 100%.
We can leave the Wolves games there, but before we go, we should discuss very quickly the Europa draw, which saw us with, is it 5-time Europa League winners or UEFA Cup winners mixed in there somewhere? I can't remember now. Sevilla, who in my head always with the Europa League, it's kind of, all the Champions League teams get knocked out and Sevilla eventually just go pick it up because they might as well. I know you're more optimistic than me in these parts, in everything and all aspects of life, maybe. What are your thoughts, Jack, on the Sevilla tie quickly?
Very excited. I think it's a good draw. I think there are a few dud draws in there where you would have drawn a team that would have been very hard to get past, but wouldn't have been such a great away day or whatever. So I think it's great for the fans who are going to go. They've been very good this season. It's going to be challenging to beat them, obviously. If there's any kind of shred of hope, is that over the last month, save the last game where they beat Betis and played well, I think they've dropped off a little bit in terms of their form over the last month. There's less goals. I think if you look at their results recently, there's more sort of 1-1s, 1-0s kind of thing. Perhaps there's a little bit of hope there in saying maybe we can go away to Sevilla and try and nab a 0-0 and then bring them back to a game at London Stadium where we'd have the advantage, basically. So yeah, a little bit positive, but tough draw.
Yes, if you're looking for positives, they barely squeaked through Zagreb and they only won one game in the Champions League this year. So they haven't found Europe too easy this season. I guess the other positive is we've had some really good games against big teams, and maybe, having shown against Wolves, maybe having the kind of desire to sit back a bit more might suit us, Cal. We might actually be able to go sneak things.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think as well, there's something to be said for, there's no greater statement of intent, is there, than turning up here and beating literally the Europa League team, really. It'd be great. I think Jack's rightly pointed out that I would almost rather have a trickier fixture like Sevilla than against some of these sort of, like, as he said, dud draws, where you'd be a little bit more hesitant. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've got my ticket. I'm excited to go down. I think the atmosphere should be popping. Obviously, we've got the second leg, which is always a bonus. And yeah, their form has dropped a bit. They have still got the best defense in La Liga, which was the first thing that I kind of thought of. They've, I think, only conceded 18 goals in 25 games now, I think, which is pretty remarkable in the league, that is. And obviously, my first thought was, we are a team that have sort of struggled throughout the season to break down solid defences. But then going into the Wolves game, that was my thought as well, and we did it. Yeah. So Wolves had one of the best defences in the league, and we managed to get past that. So I think, really, yeah, just looking forward to it. And I think you rightly said, Chris, they did get beat by Zagreb in the second leg. I didn't watch the game. I'm sure they probably fielded a weakish team, but they are beatable. I saw a lot of, this is it, Europa League campaign's over, we've got Sevilla, they're going to win it. And it's like, come on, man, like, we've beat Liverpool, we've beat Chelsea, both of those teams are better than Sevilla. So like, we can.
Man United in the cup.
Exactly. So we can do it.
My viewpoint generally is, you kind of half want the easy team. It would have been great after today's news to get Spartak Moscow and get a bye, but you go into Europa to play good teams and have kind of a laugh with it, basically enjoy it, and you're going to enjoy. Our away fans will make Sevilla their own. We'll have a lovely time in Sevilla, and we get a big game, at the very least, one really big game in the Europa to have a crack at. So, and
they're missing a few players.
Yeah,
they're missing it. Delaney will be suspended. There's a couple of injuries there. I know they played a makeshift back four last week with Fernando dropping into the back four. So
I guess they're still in the title race as well. And the title race in Spain I mean, that's huge to them. Winning that league would be so much bigger than winning the Europa League. So I guess that's that part. You know, you never know. You might catch them distracted. We've got Southampton coming up. Quick predictions. Cup game.
Yes. Go on, Joe. You can go first, bro.
Look, I really hope that we rotate heavily for this one. It's a shame to have to say that. It'd be great if we could go deep into the FA Cup, but there's no way this squad can compete across Premier League top 6 battle, Europa League, and FA Cup. I think that's incredibly unlikely that we would be able to maintain levels across all 3 tournaments. So I would rotate, and if the rotated team can get through, then they deserve to play the next one, and we'll see how far they can get. But I wouldn't back a fully rotated 11 to beat Southampton.
I will go in and say that I would still prioritise the FA Cup over everything if I could do it on just because I love the FA Cup. I think so. I would prefer to win the FA Cup than any trophy in the world, but that's an emotional attachment. But my more concern is that Southampton are absolutely on it at the moment. They're full of energy. They seem to have found a way to make us uncomfortable when they play, and that's the game we've got. I don't know about you, Cal.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much in the same camp as you guys. I agree with Jack that of the 3, this is probably the one that I would put on the back burner and give a few players some important, much needed rest. And also, you're right to point out, Chris, that Hasenhüttl has kind of developed a knack of how to seemingly get under our skin and get in behind us. So, yeah, I'm not feeling too confident. Also, I think this is all Southampton have got to play for, right? Really, they're not in the Europa run-in. They're not going to get continental qualification. They're not in a relegation battle, so they're going to be bang up for it. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Hopefully, we come back next week and we've got through, but you never know. But
how miserable is that? All 3.
I know.
Of them.
Yeah. Look, it's nice to have you at my level for once.
Sorry, everyone.
Hopefully we come back happier next week and we've got a win. But until then, I'd have to say on that note, good night. Farewell.
Right, so we're here in the offices of a Late Late Show with the host of a Late Late Show, James Corden.
Hi.
Big West Ham fan.
Yes. Big knees up Mother Brown, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm regularly on the general discussion page. There's always someone who's got some information, so I love it. Yeah. It's great. Yes, it's excitement surrounded by imminent disappointment. That's what it mostly is.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.